There is something sacred that happens when water meets prayer. Most people pass it by without noticing, without sensing the invisible conversation that unfolds when a human being, aware and humble, speaks to the water before drinking it. Yet deep inside, the body seems to know. The heart slows, the breath steadies, and something ancient inside remembers. In every civilization that has ever risen and fallen, from the temples of Egypt to the shrines of Japan, from the wells of Jerusalem to the rivers of the Andes, water has been more than a substance. It has been a bridge, a silent messenger between matter and spirit, between what is seen and what is felt. And within this simple act, to pause before drinking, to offer words, gratitude, or intention, lies one of the oldest healing rituals in human history. Science may call it hydration, faith may call it blessing, but there is a realm between both where truth shimmers like light upon still water, a realm where prayer transforms the molecular, where gratitude reorders chaos into harmony. When a person speaks to water, something responds. The vibration of the voice becomes frequency, the frequency becomes pattern, and pattern becomes structure. It was Dr. Masaru Emoto who first dared to show the world that water listens, that when words of love or hate were spoken, the crystals formed within it changed accordingly. His experiments were dismissed, ridiculed, and yet they touched a nerve deep within humanity. Because in every heart, we already knew. We knew that what we say, what we feel, what we believe, all of it touches the invisible. Imagine holding a glass of water before your lips. It reflects your face, your energy, your unspoken thoughts. You whisper a word of gratitude, or perhaps a prayer passed down through your grandmother's trembling hands, and the molecules begin to shift. Not because of magic, but because of memory. Water remembers vibration the way the earth remembers footsteps. It carries the resonance of the spoken and the silent alike. Before you drink, the water is listening. When you drink, it becomes you. Every cell, every vessel, every nerve, all of it renewed by the imprint of what you just said. That is why the ancients prayed before drinking, before crossing rivers, before washing the dead. They were not only honoring the divine, they were programming the medium of life itself. Long before laboratories, before microscopes or studies, there were stories, whispered around fires, carved on temple walls, of waters that healed, waters that spoke, waters that punished those who disrespected them. The Nile was said to hear the cries of those who approached it in despair. The Ganges was said to carry prayers directly to heaven. In the Andes, shamans still murmur songs to the mountain springs before taking their first sip, believing that each droplet carries the consciousness of the mountain itself. Across the world, in places that never met or shared language, humanity somehow arrived at the same ritual: speak before you drink, bless before you receive. But why? What changes in those few seconds of silence and intention? Could it be that the act of prayer aligns the frequencies within us with the natural coherence of water? That our nervous system, our electromagnetic field, our very DNA vibrates differently when gratitude is present? Modern science is beginning to whisper yes. Studies on coherent water, water exposed to positive intention, music, or structured fields, show differences in absorption, in molecular organization, even in the way it interacts with light. And yet, the greatest scientists of ancient times never needed to measure to believe. They could feel it. In the temples of Thoth, initiates were taught to drink from sacred basins only after reciting hymns of alignment, for they believed that the water's structure could hold divine order. In early Christian rituals, holy water was prayed upon not for superstition, but because words of light transformed it into a carrier of faith. Jewish mystics described water as the breath of creation, the medium through which divine energy passed to form all living things. And the Kabbalists, those seekers of divine architecture, claimed that the act of blessing water was an echo of Genesis itself, the word shaping the void into form. Modern minds may dismiss these as metaphors. Yet even in laboratories, words and frequencies alter structure. Human emotion, measurable through electromagnetic fields, can influence molecules beyond the body. When someone prays before drinking water, it's not merely a ritual. It's an act of synchronization between human consciousness and the molecular intelligence of the universe. The vibration of prayer reorganizes the chaos within and without. Gratitude creates coherence, and coherence is health. There's a reason why the first thing many people do in moments of fear or pain is whisper, "Please," or "Help me." The body instinctively knows that sound, intention, and water are one trinity of life. Tears, too, are water charged with emotion. They taste different depending on whether they are born of joy or grief. They are proof that emotion imprints itself upon liquid form. When we cry, our body releases energy through sacred water. When we pray, we charge it. When we drink that water with reverence, we take it back in purified, a cycle of exchange between heaven and flesh, word and molecule. In ancient monasteries, monks would line up silently before their morning cup of water, not to drink immediately, but to gaze upon it. They believed the surface of the water reflected the condition of the soul. If their minds were restless, the reflection seemed clouded. If they were at peace, the reflection glowed with stillness. They learned to wait, to pray, until the surface calmed, until their hearts aligned. Then, and only then, would they drink. The ritual was simple, yet profound. It taught them to never ingest the chaos of their own mind, to never drink until they had first blessed what they were about to become. Because that is what happens each time you drink. You become. You become the water, and the water becomes you. Every thought, every vibration, every prayer ripples through the bloodstream like a soft hymn. Prayer before water is not about religion. It is about resonance. It is about acknowledging that life is not inert matter, but living intelligence. The ancients called it spirit. Science calls it energy. The mystics call it vibration. But all are speaking of the same thing, the invisible dialogue between consciousness and creation. If one could see the difference between prayed-upon water and ordinary water under the lens of the unseen, they would weep. The prayed-upon water glows with geometric harmony, fractals unfolding like snowflakes, symmetry pulsing in rhythm with sacred sound. The unblessed, chaotic water resembles dissonance, broken patterns, and noise. This is not fantasy. It is evidence of the deep connection between intention and form. Every word we utter becomes structure somewhere in the unseen fabric of reality. Every prayer spoken before drinking water becomes a pattern that the body inherits. In indigenous traditions, water is called the first listener. Before plants, before animals, before humankind, water was there, absorbing the vibrations of creation. "Let there be light," said the voice of the divine, and the waters trembled, carrying that sound across the void. When you pray before drinking water, you echo that same moment. You remind the universe of its own beginning. You become a participant in creation, not a passive consumer of it. That is the forgotten secret, that every glass of water is an opportunity to realign your body with the harmony of the cosmos. Imagine this small act repeated over a lifetime. Every morning, before the first sip, you pause, you breathe, you whisper words that lift the water into light. "Thank you, I receive. Heal me, make me whole." Over months and years, that ritual changes more than hydration. It changes your vibration. Your body begins to hum at a different frequency. Your cells absorb not just minerals, but meaning. Illness softens, anxiety loosens. You begin to sense that the divine is not somewhere distant, but in every drop that touches your lips. To pray before water is to remember your place in creation. It's to look at something so simple, so ordinary, and see eternity reflected back. It's to realize that the sacred doesn't need temples or incense or ceremony. It needs awareness, gratitude, presence, the kind of presence that says, "I see you, life. I honor you before I take you in." That single moment of acknowledgement transforms consumption into communion. It turns drinking into a sacred act of remembrance. Some say the body is 70% water, but mystics say the soul is closer to 100%. That is why water responds so deeply to prayer, because it is speaking to itself. When you bless water, you bless yourself. When you curse, you contaminate yourself. The vibration returns, always. because water is the mirror of consciousness, the universal listener, and the prayer before water is the soul speaking to its own reflection. There was once a monk who spent decades in silence. Each morning he would fill a clay cup from a well, hold it to the light and whisper a single word: love. When asked why he repeated the same word every day, he said, "Because every day the water listens, and every day the body forgets." His skin glowed with health, though he was nearly 90. His eyes shone like morning dew. When people drank from his well, they said it tasted alive. Scientists could not explain why, but those who knew simply said, "He prayed." Perhaps that is all prayer ever was, and remembrance. To pray before drinking water is to remember that you are more than flesh, that every cell within you is listening, absorbing, remembering. It is to remember that you are not separate from the river, the rain, or the ocean. You are their continuation. To pray before you drink is to honor that lineage, to speak to the source before it becomes you. Even modern physics, in its language of particles and fields, hints at the same mystery. Quantum coherence, entanglement, vibration, all describe an invisible unity between matter and thought. When you direct loving intention toward water, you are participating in that unity consciously. You are not just hydrating your body, you are instructing energy, you are giving order to chaos. And as you drink, that order becomes your flesh, your thought, your breath. So when you next stand before a glass of water, remember, it is not waiting to quench your thirst. It is waiting to hear your voice. Speak gently. Speak with reverence, for what you say will become you. There is an ancient belief whispered through forgotten temples and carried in the hymns of old, that every drop of water contains the memory of creation. Long before language, long before men named their gods or wrote their prayers, water was the first scripture, written not in ink but in vibration. When the universe was still a symphony of frequencies, it was water that listened first. It absorbed the divine utterance, the sound that split the void into form. To pray before drinking water is to repeat that first act of listening, to realign the body with the rhythm that began everything. Science, in its search for patterns, may one day catch up to this truth, but the ancients already lived it. They knew that water was not simply a resource. It was the bridge between heaven and flesh, thought and manifestation. In the Kabbalah, it is said that before God spoke light into existence, he breathed into the waters. The Spirit moved across their surface, and from that sacred breath, creation unfolded. To drink without prayer, therefore, was to consume without consciousness, but to pray before drinking was to receive the same breath that began the world. Every religion, in its own way, preserved this understanding. The Christians called it holy water, the Hindus called it Ganga Jal, the Muslims spoke of Zamzam, the well of divine mercy. The Buddhists poured water over statues to awaken compassion. And yet, beneath all names and rituals, there was one truth. Water was divine intelligence made visible. It recorded every vibration, every intention, every word. Modern science began to rediscover this mystery at the edge of quantum physics. Researchers studying the structure of hydrogen bonds noticed that water does not behave as it should. It organizes, reorganizes, remembers. It reacts to frequency, light, and emotion. It behaves as if it were aware. Dr. Gerald Pollack of the University of Washington called it the fourth phase of water, a structured state between liquid and solid, capable of storing energy and information. Mystics smiled when they heard this. They had been saying it for millennia. Water is the bridge between the visible and the invisible. When you pray, your words carry electromagnetic patterns. When those patterns meet water, they change its structure. That is not belief, that is physics clothed in holiness. Consider the rituals of indigenous healers across continents that never met, all of them speaking to water before using it to cleanse or heal. In the Philippines, the Babaylan would whisper the name of the person to the water before bathing them, believing the water would listen and adapt its vibration to what was needed. In Japan, before the art of purification known as misogi, the practitioner bows to the river and recites norito, sacred words of gratitude. In the Andes, the shamans sing to the water spirits of the mountains, calling them abuelas, grandmothers, the wise keepers of health. Each of these practices rests on the same understanding, that water listens, that it responds, that it holds memory. The Church once called it superstition, yet even it preserved the essence of this truth in its rites. The priest blesses the water before baptism. The holy water font at the entrance of the temple is there not merely for tradition, but for remembrance. Each time the faithful dip their fingers and trace the cross, they are reawakening the body's memory of sacred geometry. The water is imprinted with prayer, and that prayer reorders the energy field of whoever touches it. Even the simplest prayer, whispered with sincerity before a glass of water, can do the same. Modern life has made us forget this intimacy. We treat water as background noise, a thing to be consumed, measured, sold. But in truth it is the most mystical substance on earth. It shapeshifts between gas, liquid and solid with ease, flows upward through trees defying gravity, and dances to the rhythm of invisible frequencies. The ancients saw these behaviors not as chemical quirks, but as signs of consciousness. Water was life observing itself. When the Egyptians poured libations at dawn, they believed that each drop carried the blessings of Ra. When the Mayans offered water to the cenotes, they said the gods listened through the reflection. Prayer before drinking is the act of participating in this ancient exchange. When you lift the glass to your lips and offer a word of gratitude, you are performing a microcosm of creation itself. Your breath vibrates, your heart emits an electromagnetic field, and the water receives that signature. It becomes a vessel of your intention, and when you drink, that intention flows into every cell. You are not only drinking water, you are drinking the vibration of your own consciousness returned to you, purified. But there is another layer, one that the mystics whispered only to the initiates, that the true purpose of praying before drinking is not merely to bless the water, but to cleanse the self. In prayer, you silence the chaos of the mind. You bring coherence to the field of energy that surrounds your body. That coherence mirrors itself in the water's molecular structure. When you drink, the harmony you created outside becomes the harmony you carry inside. The result is healing, because health, at its most fundamental level, is the body's ability to maintain coherent vibration. Illness, the ancients said, is dissonance, the loss of sacred rhythm. Prayer restores rhythm. Water transmits it. In the writings of Paracelsus, the 16th century alchemist who bridged science and spirituality, there is a passage few remember. Water becomes that which it beholds. He understood that water reflects not only light, but essence. When a person gazes upon water with love, that love is mirrored back in molecular perfection. When a person stares with indifference or anger, the pattern collapses. Even in the plant kingdom, this phenomenon can be felt. Experiments show that plants grow differently when watered with blessed water versus unblessed. The former displays coherence, the latter stress. Something unseen is transferred, intention itself. There is an old legend told among the mystics of Sufi tradition. A traveler, exhausted and dying of thirst, stumbled upon a spring in the desert. But before drinking, he remembered his teacher's instruction, "Do not drink before you speak to it." So he closed his eyes and whispered, "Bismillah, in the name of the divine." He drank, and the water tasted like paradise. Later, another traveler arrived, skeptical and impatient. He plunged his face into the spring without a word and found it bitter. The spring had not changed, the drinkers had. The lesson was simple yet eternal. Prayer transforms perception, and perception transforms experience. The water you drink is filtered not only through your glass, but through your consciousness. Even within the Hebrew language lies this secret. The word for water, mayim, shares its root with shamayim, meaning heavens. Water is the earthly mirror of the sky, the tangible reflection of the divine. When you pray before drinking, you connect those two realms. The water in your hands and the heavens above you. You bring heaven into the body. That is why prophets fasted and prayed beside rivers. They believed water could carry their prayers faster than words could. The flow of a river, they said, was the physical manifestation of prayer itself, always moving, always returning. In Eastern medicine, it is said that qi, or life energy, travels best through pure water. When the body is filled with stressed, chaotic water, Water that has been bottled, pumped, or stored without reverence, the chi stumbles. But when water is preyed upon, its molecular arrangement becomes crystalline, resonant and life-enhancing. The body, being mostly water, immediately synchronizes to that pattern. The heart's rhythm steadies, the brain's waves calm, and the immune system strengthens. Gratitude literally strengthens immunity because it aligns the vibration of the human field with that of coherent water. There are monasteries hidden in the Himalayas where monks still chant mantras over large bowls of water each morning. They believe that those vibrations travel through the air and purify the atmosphere for miles around. Visitors who drink from their wells often describe the taste as alive. Not sweeter, not different in flavor, but in essence. They report feeling as if the water breathes with them. And perhaps it does, because prayer awakens the intelligence within water, reminding it of its divine origin. For centuries, Western science dismissed these stories as myth, but the tide is changing. Researchers studying structured water are discovering measurable differences in conductivity, pH, and light absorption after exposure to prayer, music, or intention. Some experiments show that water blessed by monks remains fresh longer than untreated water, resisting decay. These are not miracles. They are the laws of resonance at work. Prayer organizes energy, and organization resists entropy, the force of decay. The more coherent the energy field, the more resistant to disorder. This is why holy water does not spoil easily. It is water that remembers order. And so when you pray before drinking, you are performing a sacred act of creation. You are imprinting harmony upon chaos. You are teaching your cells to remember divinity. That is why this practice has persisted quietly through time, through wars, through the rise and fall of empires. It requires no religion, no temple, no priest, only awareness. Only the humility to pause before the most basic act of living and remember that even drinking can be sacred. There is a secret buried in this simplicity. What you say before drinking determines what the water becomes inside you. Gratitude becomes calmness. Faith becomes resilience. Love becomes vitality. Despair, if unspoken, dissolves into silence. The prayer is not for the water to change. It is for you to change through the water. And so the old monks say, do not drink in haste. Do not swallow life without acknowledgement, for water is listening. It remembers every word you whisper and carries it into every cell. Speak beauty, and beauty will flow through you. Speak peace, and peace will flow through you. Speak faith, and faith will fill your blood. When you understand this, even a single drop becomes sacred. You no longer see water as simple refreshment, but as communion with the divine intelligence that shapes all things. Prayer before drinking water is the return to that understanding, the reunion of the human and the holy. Something begins to change inside the human being who prays before drinking water. Not a miracle that shouts, but a transformation that whispers. It starts quietly, beneath the surface of daily life, as if the body remembers something long forgotten. The first sign is stillness. The mind, once restless and full of noise, starts to calm when the hands lift the glass with reverence. Each sip becomes slower, more intentional, and the body in its infinite intelligence begins to listen too. It feels the vibration of gratitude, the rhythm of the words that precede the act. And in that alignment between thought, word, and substance, something heals. Healing has never been about fixing what is broken. It has always been about restoring harmony to what has become dissonant. The ancients knew this. They saw disease not as punishment, but as forgetfulness, a moment when the body forgets the song it was meant to sing. Prayer, especially when joined with water, reminds the body of its melody. The heart begins to beat in coherence. The cells begin to communicate more fluidly. The energy field surrounding the body strengthens. Science now measures this as heart coherence, as if it were a new discovery. But long before monitors and graphs, monks and healers already knew that when the heart is aligned with gratitude, the entire body vibrates in resonance with the divine. Every sip becomes a meditation. Every glass of water becomes a teacher. You begin to sense that life itself was never about chasing meaning, but remembering it. And water is the mirror that helps you see. The more you pray, the more you drink with awareness, the more you notice the subtle texture of existence changing. The taste of the water feels alive. The energy after drinking feels purer. You start to feel that everything, and even silence, has consciousness. The space around you hums differently. You feel connected to something invisible yet intimate, and then a deeper transformation unfolds, the merging of physical and spiritual hydration. The body starts to reject chaos. Foods, emotions, and environments that carry dissonance feel heavier. You instinctively crave purity, calmness, simplicity. The nervous system, once tense, softens. Stress no longer rules the rhythm of your day. Your dreams grow clearer, your thoughts more compassionate. And somehow, though nothing seems to have changed externally, the entire world begins to look different. That is the true miracle of prayer before water. It changes perception. It changes the lens through which reality is experienced. And as perception changes, so does reality itself. It is said that the water of life does not flow from fountains or springs, but from within. When prayer becomes the natural language of your being, the boundaries between the external and internal dissolve. You no longer pray to water, you pray with it. You become part of the same vibration, the same current that flows through rivers and veins alike. Your body becomes a temple of flowing gratitude. Each time you drink, you are reminded that life itself passes through you. You are both the vessel and the current. Many spiritual traditions spoke of this union. In Taoism, it was called Wu Wei, effortless harmony flowing like water. In Christianity, it was baptism, rebirth through the sacred element. In Buddhism, it was mindfulness, the awareness that transforms the mundane into the divine. In Sufism, it was fana, the dissolving of the self into the beloved. In all of them, water was present, always, because water is the language of transformation. Consider what happens to the body on a molecular level when this awareness deepens. The structured water inside your cells begins to align more coherently. Energy moves freely. The mitochondria, those tiny flames of life, burn cleaner. The mind feels lighter. Old emotions once stored in the body like stagnant ponds begin to release. Some call it detox. The mystics call it purification. You may cry without knowing why. You may find forgiveness rising like a tide within you. It is the water, carrying away what no longer serves, guided by the vibration of your prayer. The great mystic Teresa of Avila once said that prayer is like drawing water from a well. At first it is laborious, but soon it flows on its own. When you begin to pray before drinking, it may feel like a ritual, something external. But with time it becomes natural, effortless. You no longer remind yourself to pray, your being does it for you. The water reminds you. It becomes a living dialogue between soul and substance. You begin to feel that every glass you lift is not merely an act of drinking, but a ceremony of rebirth. Those who practice this regularly often describe a deep emotional change. The feeling of isolation fades. The heart feels fuller. Depression, that heavy fog of meaninglessness, begins to lift. Because the act of blessing water each day reminds you that you are not powerless, not lost. You are part of the grand conversation of creation. Each prayer is a reply to the divine whisper that began it all. You realize that healing is not something that happens to you. It is something you participate in. Some healers describe this transformation as awakening the memory of water within. They mean that since the body itself is mostly water, it holds the same capacity for memory and transformation. When you bless external water, you awaken the dormant intelligence of the internal waters, the fluids in your blood, your cells, even your brain. Ancient yogis called it Amrita, the inner nectar of immortality. When that inner water vibrates with harmony, vitality and youth return. The body regenerates faster, the skin glows, the eyes clear, the heart steadies. Modern biochemistry might explain this as hydration efficiency, improved mitochondrial function, or parasympathetic activation. But the ancients would simply say, "You are remembering what you are made of." There is a story from Japan about a woman who prayed before every meal and every drink for 60 years. When she died, doctors were astonished at the condition of her organs. They looked decades younger. Her heart showed almost no calcification, her liver no signs of stress. Scientists could not explain it, but her granddaughter said simply, She always spoke to her water before drinking. To her, it was not superstition, it was love made visible. Love, after all, is the highest frequency known to the soul. When you infuse water with love, you elevate it beyond its physical state. You remind it of its divine origin. The same happens within you. Fear begins to dissolve because love does not leave space for it. Anxiety quiets because love synchronizes the heartbeat with gratitude. Prayer before drinking water is therefore not about religion but about resonance, the resonance of love harmonizing with creation. At a certain point in this transformation, you begin to sense that your presence itself blesses the water. You realize that you no longer need elaborate words. Even silence carries the same power when it is full of awareness. Your thoughts alone are enough. You might hold the glass and simply feel gratitude, and that feeling alone changes the structure of what you're about to drink. You might walk by a stream and notice the water glisten as if responding to your presence. Because it is. You have tuned yourself to the frequency of the living universe, and life recognizes its reflection. The transformation deepens. Prayer becomes less an act and more a state of being. You no longer pray for healing, as do you live in healing. You no longer pray for peace, you embody it. Your vibration begins to affect others. Those who drink from your hands, share your food, or simply stand near you feel calmer. It is not mystical exaggeration. It is resonance spreading through the field. Just as one tuning fork vibrates another into harmony, a coherent being aligns the energy of those nearby. And since your body is water, your coherence becomes contagious. In this phase, you begin to understand why the mystics always associated water with enlightenment. The Buddha attained awakening beside a river. Christ was baptized in one. Lao Tzu compared the highest virtue to water. It is not coincidence. Water represents surrender, adaptability, and flow, the very essence of enlightenment. When you pray before drinking, you surrender your control. You say to the universe, I trust you, I receive, I align. That trust changes everything. The body relaxes into faith. And faith, being coherent energy, organizes the chaos within. Healing follows naturally, silently, beautifully. As this awareness matures, gratitude becomes your second nature. You no longer separate prayer from action. When you cook, when you wash, when you breathe, you are praying. You live in reverence. You notice that even difficult days feel lighter because you have found a rhythm that the world cannot take away. The rhythm of sacred water flowing through you. You realize that the transformation was never about the water changing, but about you remembering that you were never separate from it. So the prayer before drinking becomes a mirror for life itself. How many things do we consume? Experiences, emotions, relationships, without blessing them first? How much suffering arises from our failure to pause and infuse what we take in with consciousness? The ritual of praying before water teaches the art of sacred intake, to receive life slowly, reverently, and transform it through intention. That is the alchemy of the soul. That is what turns water into light. And when you finally grasp that truth, the transformation completes its circle. You begin to see that the divine has been hidden in simplicity all along. The miracle was never in the water, but in the awareness you bring to it. And yet through that awareness, even the smallest drop becomes a universe. There comes a moment in this journey, often quiet, unannounced, when something awakens inside the one who prays before drinking water. It is not a flash of light or a sudden revelation shouted from the heavens, but a soft recognition that begins in the heart. You start to feel that everything around you is alive, that every sound, every breeze, every drop of rain is part of a vast conversation that has been happening since the dawn of time, and you realize, perhaps for the first time, that you were never outside of it. You have always been part of that dialogue between creation and consciousness, but it took the simplicity of praying before water to remind you. In that moment, the boundary between prayer and physics dissolves. You see that what the mystics called faith is what science now calls energy alignment. What religion named blessing, quantum mechanics describes as coherence. What the ancients whispered as sacred truth, modern researchers glimpse in the behavior of waves and particles that consciousness shapes matter. When you speak to water, you are not bending the laws of nature. You are participating in them. The universe itself is built on responsiveness. Every atom listens, every molecule remembers, every vibration calls back an echo. As this awakening deepens, you begin to sense the vast intelligence woven through reality. You feel that the water you hold in your hands is not separate from the clouds above, the rivers that carve valleys, or the ocean that breathes with the moon. You drink and realize that the same hydrogen atoms now flowing through your veins once floated in the heart of stars. They journeyed through comets, glaciers, and ancient seas before becoming part of you. You are not just drinking water, you are drinking the memory of the cosmos. Every sip is a communion with eternity, and the prayer that precedes it is your way of acknowledging that divine lineage. Science has begun to find language for this sacred knowing. Quantum biology reveals that water molecules within the body form intricate networks that transfer information faster than any nerve signal. They act as conduits for light, literally photons of energy passing through you. When you pray, when you feel gratitude, those photons organize. Coherence spreads like ripples on a pond. Cells communicate more efficiently. DNA expresses health instead of stress. The body begins to glow with measurable biophotons, the light of life. You become a living reflection of the prayer you spoke. This is what the sages meant when they said, "The body becomes what it blesses." In ancient Egypt, initiates were taught that the element of water represented the boundary between worlds, the mirror between the seen and the unseen. They called it the Veil of Nut, the mother of the cosmos. When they prayed before water, they were not worshipping the liquid itself, but the intelligence that animated it. They believed that by aligning their vibration to that intelligence, they could cross from ignorance to knowing, from mortality to eternity. The Greeks later echoed this in their myths of Lethe and Mnemosyne, the rivers of forgetfulness and memory. To drink without prayer was to drink from Lethe, to forget your divine nature. To drink with prayer was to drink from Mnemosyne, to remember who you are. And that is the heart of awakening remembrance. You begin to remember that the divine is not something you visit, but something you embody. The act of praying before water becomes the symbol of that realization, a ritual of remembering your place in the living whole. Every time you lift the glass, you are saying to existence, "I remember, I am part of you, I honor you." And the universe in turn whispers back, "I remember you too." You start to feel that everything, even the most ordinary, carries a pulse of holiness. The way sunlight refracts through a drop of water on your skin becomes a message. The sound of rain on the window becomes a hymn. The world stops feeling mechanical and starts feeling relational. You no longer feel alone because you can sense the consciousness within everything around you. You understand that when you speak to water, you are also speaking to the same essence that formed stars, trees, and souls. And in that realization, you discover the greatest secret, that prayer is not communication with a distant God, but communion with the divine intelligence that is within all. The more you live in this awareness, the more you see how interconnected everything truly is. Your emotions affect the water within your body, which affects the energy you project, which in turn affects the people around you. Their energy affects the air, the plants, the animals, the rain. The entire planet is one vast organism of water and consciousness, exchanging vibrations endlessly. Your prayer before drinking ripples through that field. You may think it small, but the universe never ignores coherence. A single drop of order brings harmony to chaos. That is why one person's sincere prayer can shift the energy of a room, a family, even a nation. The mystics of Tibet believed that if enough monks prayed over water and released it into rivers, the vibration of compassion would spread across the land. Modern experiments measuring the frequency of group meditation show global magnetic fluctuations aligning with intention. What happens in silence within you touches the entire network of existence. When you pray before drinking water, you are contributing to the rebalancing of the world. You are helping life remember itself. And then something miraculous begins to happen in your perception of time. You stop rushing. You begin to notice how water moves. Not in haste, not in resistance, but with grace. You start to live like water, flowing around obstacles instead of colliding with them. The things that once caused tension or anger now dissolve easily. People who once drained you no longer disturb your peace. You have learned from the very element you bless. The prayer before water has become your teacher in the art of flow. This is the awakening stage the mystics called the transparent self, when the ego, once dense and noisy, becomes clear like pure water. You still exist, but light passes through you. You reflect the divine without distortion. You can love without attachment, act without fear, and speak without manipulation. The world looks the same, but you see it differently. You see through it into the sacred architecture beneath appearances, and every sip of water feels like drinking truth itself. One day, you will find yourself standing by a river or holding a simple glass, and you will realize that you no longer need to remind yourself to pray. The prayer will arise on its own, wordless, yet full. You will feel gratitude radiating not from your lips, but from your entire being. You will sense that the river is praying to you just as you are praying to it. The boundary between giver and receiver will vanish. In that silence, you will feel what the mystics called the return to origin. You may remember faintly the words of the gospel, "Whoever drinks of the water I give shall never thirst." Perhaps it was never about religion, but about this very state, the awareness that the divine flows within you, and that true thirst is not for liquid, but for remembrance. The living water was never somewhere else, it was your consciousness awakened. At this stage, faith and science no longer conflict in your mind. You see them as two languages describing one truth, the interaction between intention and form. You feel that spirituality is not separate from physics, but is its highest expression. And you begin to notice how this awareness reshapes your entire life. Relationships become more harmonious because you speak from coherence. Work feels lighter because your energy flows effortlessly. Even the challenges that once overwhelmed you now appear as opportunities for deeper alignment. You have become a conduit of the sacred. The water you drink carries your vibration into the world, and those around you feel it without knowing why. You may find people drawn to your calmness, sensing something luminous in your presence. It is the light of coherence, the natural radiance of one who remembers. Prayer before drinking water was merely the door. What you discovered beyond it is the truth of who you are. This awakening, however, is not an ending, but a beginning. The more you remember, the more responsibility you feel to live in awareness, to speak words that heal, to walk gently upon the earth that gives you water. You realize that to pollute a river is to harm yourself, that to bless the rain is to bless the planet. Every act becomes sacred stewardship. You are no longer separate from the world. You are part of its consciousness, its prayer, its heartbeat. And so, each morning when you hold that glass, you are not just blessing water, you are blessing existence. You are reminding creation of its own holiness. You are, in the quietest of ways, participating in the reawakening of the world. The true miracle you discover is not that prayer changes water, but that water changes the one who prays. For in awakening the sacred in something as simple as a sip, you awaken the sacred in yourself. At the end of all seeking, when the mind grows quiet and the heart learns to listen, there comes a deep and wordless understanding. It was never about the water, and yet it was always about the water. Every sip, every prayer, every moment of stillness before that transparent mirror was a rehearsal for remembering who you are. You began this journey curious, perhaps skeptical, perhaps wounded. You only wanted to see if a simple act, praying before drinking something, could change something within you. But somewhere along the way, you discovered that the change was not small. It was everything. Because in truth, prayer before water is not a superstition. It is not an empty gesture or a quaint echo of ancient times. It is the simplest expression of reverence. And reverence is the foundation of all healing. It teaches you to pause in a world that rushes. It teaches you to give before you take. It teaches you that life, when approached with humility, responds with grace. Through that pause before a glass, you found a silence that revealed a sacred order, hidden beneath the noise of modern life. You now know what the ancients meant when they said that the divine hides in plain sight. The miracle was never hidden in a temple, or in a sacred book, or in some distant realm beyond the stars. It was here, in every drop that touches your lips, in every breath that condenses on your window, in every tear that cleanses your heart. Water was the messenger all along, and now, when you pray before drinking, you are not performing a ritual. You are entering into communion with that messenger. You are allowing it to carry your love into creation. Imagine for a moment the journey of the water that now fills your glass. It rose as mist from the ocean, carried the songs of whales and the pulse of tides, drifted through winds over continents, absorbed the scent of forests and the sighs of mountains, then fell as rain, nourishing the roots that became the food on your table. It filtered through soil that has held the bones of ancestors and the seeds of tomorrow. And now it stands before you, transparent, ancient, waiting. When you whisper your prayer, it listens not as something foreign, but as something familiar, as if it has heard your soul before, because it has. Every drop in the universe has touched every life that ever was. To drink with reverence, then, is to drink the memory of humanity itself. You begin to sense the sacred mathematics of this truth. Every act of gratitude multiplies harmony. Every act of indifference multiplies chaos. The world is not separate from your smallest gestures. When you bless water, you send coherence into the invisible network of life. You heal something far beyond yourself. Somewhere, a river softens its current. Somewhere, a plant grows stronger. Somewhere, another person feels a peace they cannot explain. For you and they are connected by the same current. In this reflection, you also see how much you had forgotten. You remember the times you drank mindlessly, ate hurriedly, spoke harshly, walked without noticing the ground beneath your feet. You see how each unconscious act was a missed conversation with the divine. But there is no guilt here, only understanding. The purpose of forgetting was to make remembering meaningful. Without darkness, light cannot reveal itself. Without thirst, one cannot know the blessing of water. You look back and realize that every religion, every mystical teaching, every culture that endured carried this secret in its heart. The Sufis spoke of the cup that overflows with divine wine. The Christians spoke of living water. The Hindus sang of the sacred rivers. The Taoists spoke of yielding like water. The native elders called it the blood of the earth. Each pointed to the same truth, that water is both the physical and spiritual substance of life, and that to approach it with prayer is to align with the heartbeat of creation itself. Now, when you pray before drinking, you do not ask for anything. You simply listen. The silence becomes the prayer. The gratitude becomes the language. You hold the glass and for a moment, you feel time stop. You see the reflection of light on the surface, and in that reflection, you see the entire story of your existence, from the first breath of creation to the rhythm of your own heart. You feel an indescribable unity, as if every particle of your being were saying the same word in unison. Thank you. And in that, thank you, you discover freedom. Freedom from fear because you realize that life supports those who honor it. Freedom from loneliness because you see that nothing in existence is truly separate. Freedom from doubt because the evidence of divinity is now tangible. You can feel it every time water touches your tongue. The taste is not just liquid, it is remembrance. It is the soft return to the truth that you are loved by the very universe that created you. From this state of awareness, even suffering transforms. You see that pain, too, is part of the river, a bend in the current that teaches flow. You no longer resist what comes, for you trust the intelligence that carries you. Prayer before water has taught you that surrender is not weakness, but wisdom. The same force that guides the river to the sea guides your life toward understanding. You begin to move through challenges as water does, quietly, persistently, carving new paths without violence. Sometimes you will stand in the rain and feel it differently now. You will tilt your head back and let it touch your skin, and you will know that the sky is blessing you. You will feel the droplets as whispers of the same prayer you once offered. You will realize that prayer is cyclical. What you give returns, purified and multiplied. You will see that even the oceans are praying, their tides rising and falling like breaths of the divine. And so the simple act that began as curiosity has become revelation, transformation, awakening, and now reflection. You understand that this journey was not linear but circular, like the water cycle itself, endlessly renewing. You are the cloud, the rain, the river, the ocean, and the dew. You are both the one who prays and the one who is prayed to. The duality between you and creation has dissolved into unity. There will come days when you will forget again, when the noise of the world grows too loud, when fear or fatigue returns, but the memory will always remain within you, the memory that water remembers, that prayer heals, that silence speaks. And in those moments, you will know what to do. You will pour yourself a glass of water, sit in stillness, and whisper to it as if greeting an old friend. Thank you. The vibration of that word will travel through your voice into the water, through the water into your body, through your body into the field of life, and the circle will begin again, because that is the eternal rhythm, the giving and receiving of reverence. Prayer before water is the seed of that rhythm, teaching humanity the lost art of sacred living. It is the reminder that every act, however small, can be holy if done with awareness. It is proof that the divine does not demand grand gestures, only gentle remembrance. So as this reflection closes, let your heart remain open. Let your next glass of water be your next prayer. Let your next breath be your next offering. Remember that every drop you bless carries the echo of your love into the world. And remember, too, that every drop that touches you carries the love of creation back. In the stillness that follows, you will feel it, that quiet pulse, that ancient rhythm. It is the same vibration that moved across the waters before the first dawn. It is the same presence that moves within you now. It whispers not in thunder, but in the tender sound of flowing water. You are part of me, and I am part of you. Drink and remember,